Coaching Skills for Supervisors, Getting Employee Performance and Behavior Improvement, One Meeting at a Time, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Deb Beto, and I will be your moderator today, and I will also be monitoring questions that you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, I'm going to review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discussed can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen, and I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. And we do not control the audio. Your devices control the audio. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. And if all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Please feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using either the chat box or the questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you will need to tap on the screen just once for the options bar to appear, and then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will work your questions or feedback into the presentation, and the presenter will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. And if for some reason we don't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged, and like I said, the presenter will be answering the questions at the end. Our presenter today is Dr. Steve Albrecht. Dr. Albrecht is a trainer, author, and consultant specializing in complex HR issues and security concerns. He holds a doctorate in business administration, an MA in security management, a BS in psychology, and a BA in English. He is board certified in HR, security management, employee coaching, and threat management. He has written about 28 books on business, service, leadership, security, and criminal justice subjects. With that, let's begin today's webinar, Coaching Skills for Supervisors, Getting Employee Performance and Behavior Improvement, One Meeting at a Time. Steve, you should be able to get your presentation going, and I will go on mute. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb, and good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Appreciate the conversation today. We'll spend a quick hour on this coaching subject. This is an issue I spend a lot of time with, training it, writing about it, thinking about it, because I think it's really the gateway to employee performance. And instead of waiting to get to the discipline stage, or waiting to get to even worse, the termination stage, or going through a lot of struggle and conversation with each other about what we do about employees that are not performing or behaving the way we want to, we look at the coaching intervention as the earliest tool, the earliest step for employee improvement on behavior and performance. And so when I talk about two different things, one of the issues I want you to focus on is the difference between a PIP, PIP, performance improvement plan, and a BIP, BIP, behavior improvement plan. You may have employees who are really good at their job, but just not very nice people when it comes to dealing with coworkers or bosses or clients or customers. You may have employees that are really good people skills, social skills, everybody likes them, but are not very good at their jobs. And unfortunately, you may have some people that are kind of both not good at their jobs and not great people skills either. Performance improvement plan, it's about performance of work, deadlines, quality of work, errors, taking ownership of their work and the work quality, working to their job description, working to their job duties as they have been hired for. Behavior improvement is stuff like sarcasm and gossip and anger and dismissiveness and idea killing. And so what sometimes we see is, you know, this person's the best IT supervisor we have or the best IT employee, but they're a jerk. And this woman's the best salesperson we have, but she's not very nice to people outside the inside the organization as opposed to outside the organization. So when I look at coaching, it is a pre-discipline early intervention, pre-discipline early conversation about performance and behavior. And I've been doing a lot of this in my career, mostly because I started back in 1992 as a workplace violence prevention guy. I wrote one of the first books in the country on workplace violence, and as I have evolved in that subject through the post office shootings era and Columbine and everything that followed after that to where we are now, what I figured out was a lot of the stuff that I was being asked to do for my clients was not about workplace violence prevention, but it was about conflict. It was about employees not getting along. And it was about employees that were kind of in that gray area of they're just doing okay, but not as good as they could be doing. And so I spent a lot of time developing my coaching skills and working on these issues, which we're going to be talking about. I went to the Fielding Graduate University and got a cohort, a credential in coaching, worked on that cohort for about 6 months, and just did a lot of it on behalf of my clients. And most of my clients in my entire career are in municipal government. So I appreciate the conversation with you here today. Always happy to work with Deb and the good folks at Aspen Risk Management, who I've known for probably 25 years and been doing these programs for them for about 5 or 6. And also thanks to Heffernan for sponsoring this conversation here. You can certainly get a hold of me at Dr. Steve at drstevealbrecht.com. I do a lot of stuff around this issue where people send me scenarios, behavioral performance scenarios, which I will address in an email private to you if you want that to happen. So we'll talk about some tools for your toolkit. If you're a new supervisor, this conversation is important because it's going to be the cornerstone of a lot of the work that you do with the people that work for you. If you're a longtime supervisor, a longtime manager, you have had these conversations in various ways, shapes, and forms. Some of you may have had to have the hygiene conversation with an employee, which is always a challenging one. Some of you may have been involved in conflict resolution discussions between 2 employees, which is a coaching intervention, which is stressful and sometimes difficult because you have to go back and forth with each individual employee to get to ground rules and get to agreement that they don't have to love each other or like each other, but they have to get along and coexist in the environment they're in. That's what our clients and our customers, taxpayers expect. So let's jump in. If you look at the business case for coaching employees, it's about the impact on the business. I use that phrase a lot. You may have employees that are a little eccentric, a little interesting, a little bit challenging in terms of their worldviews and how they do their work, but they don't impact the business in a negative way. You may have employees that don't impact the business because they're good performers. We call those kind of in the HR slang as rising stars or shining stars. Your rising stars are employees that you may look to think about promotional support, getting them to the next level if they want to. And our most successful rising stars are maybe the people that take over for you as you get ready to retire or move on or promote in your career as well. We do that through coaching and mentorship. And then shining stars are just people that do good work, and you perhaps leave them in charge when you're doing other things, or you go out of town, or you give them delegated tasks and projects because you can know that they will do them and you trust their skills and their abilities and the quality of their work. The problem sometimes that comes up with shining stars and rising stars is we tend to treat them as teacher's pet. They get good assignments, they get delegated tasks, they get to work on projects that are probably more fun and maybe more challenging and more interesting than other things, and other employees see that. And so it's a fairness issue. We want to make sure we're treating everybody who works for us fairly and they get equal opportunities to do good things on behalf of the organization. The other part about the rising star or the shining star is we can burn them out. And so what happens, and you know this to be true for human nature, we have good relationships with employees, and so we overload them with stuff. We give them too much work and they get a little burnt out. So it is a fairness issue. It is a equitable split of all the work and the opportunities for everybody that works for you. And also that we make sure that we take care of our folks so we don't burn them out, overload them with too much work because they're good at their jobs. So you may have had the same experience in your career. I've had it. Being good at your job sometimes means that your reward is not necessarily praise or more money or support, it's more work. And so that's a concern for us as well. So when you look at the business case for coaching, just jot down this phrase either in your mind or in notes, which is, what is the impact on the business of this person's performance or behavior? This gives us permission to coach. We look at targeted coaching for selected employees. We say, okay, who do we see in our environment that has come to our attention via performance improvement plans or behavior improvement plans, or probably more specifically, the performance evaluation has not been good from the previous 6 months or the previous year. I use evals, especially if you're a new supervisor and are taking over a group of people that you have not supervised fully for a year or so before. The evals can be a kind of a guidepost for what are concerns from the previous supervisor, and you may be seeing similar or different things that you want to address through coaching. We'll talk about the coaching process, which really shifts based on the generation of the employee that you're dealing with. Younger employees, you can coach by email or even by text. I mean, I'm an old guy and been doing this for a long time, and this would seem like, you know, blasphemous to not have a face-to-face conversation with your boss back in the old days, but certainly it's possible now to coach people by email. It's possible to coach people by Zoom. I do it every week. It's possible to coach people by telephone. So you say, well, you know, some of those modalities, we don't have body language and we don't have tone and we don't have the full attention of our employee because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. At least with Zoom or face-to-face, you have everything that you can see in terms of their body language and eye contact and things like that. But based on the generational differences that we see, Gen X and millennials and baby boomers and Gen Y and Gen Z and Alpha generation, the newest one, is that there are lots of ways to do it. And I would refer to sort of a lighter touch would be corridor coaching, walking down the hall, talking and walking with an employee about something that you want them to think about and some changes to make. So the easiest way to look at coaching from our perspective is pre-discipline conversation and maybe post-discipline conversation. I've done that after people come back from sexual harassment investigations and things like that, where you're just looking at performance and behavior. And then the other part, which is a paradox, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. I already told you about the shining stars and the rising stars, is it's easy sometimes in the coaching thought process to ignore employees that have challenges, ignore employees that have problems, ignore employees that are not so much fun to be around. And as human nature, we move away from conflict and towards peace. And in human nature, especially in business, we move away from difficulties and towards more easier conversations. But those are the people, and this is very important, those are the people that need your help. And so one of the challenges that you see in coaching is you will have to spend more time with people that kind of drive you crazy. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Running coaching meetings, one of the things that we'll discuss there is that you have talking points, that you, like a good politician, you have 3 or 4 things that you want to bring up. And in terms of the structure for coaching meetings, I like the idea of 1 issue per meeting. And it's not a collection of the employee's sins over 364 days. It's 1 issue per meeting. Typically the meetings last 45 minutes to an hour. You take notes. You keep track of those notes in what I will call a coaching file. We'll discuss what a coaching file is. It's not a secondary personnel file. It is a way for you to keep track of what was discussed during the span of the coaching meetings, which could last, you know, during the rating period up to a year. And also the coaching meeting is sometimes a one-way conversation and sometimes a two-way conversation. The one-way conversation is, here's some stuff you need to stop doing, employee, immediately. It's a safety hazard. It's a performance issue that's not good for the business, or it's dangerous, or it's stupid. These are things you need to stop doing immediately because it really hurts the impact of what we're trying to do here. And then other things are more of a two-way conversation. Let's talk about some potential solutions. I may not know, even as your boss, what some good ideas are for this particular issue, which you may employ. So when I think about you doing the coaching meetings, I'd like you to consider changing your vocabulary a little bit to not use ever the phrase constructive criticism. I do not think that's an effective phrase because semantically it makes people defensive. If people say it to me, and I teach training seminars, people come up to me, you know, every once in a while and say, can I give you a little constructive criticism? And I always say, oh no, here it comes. Gee, Steve, you talk too fast. Yeah, no kidding, blame my parents, right? But what I use in lieu of that phrase is the phrase feedback. And I think feedback is a semantically easier, digestible phrase for people. So as a boss, when you say, let me give you a little feedback, it makes better sense to people to be more willing to hear that. I'm working on a webinar right now for some of my library clients. I do a lot of work with libraries around the United States, and I'm the go-to guy for library security and safety. And I've been teaching library stuff for 25 years. I have a book now called The Next Conversation with a lawyer named Jefferson Fisher. So Jefferson Fisher kind of made his bones on the internet and TikToks and various YouTube videos where he just talks about human communication. And he's a very skilled guy, good looking cat, very, very smooth, but also very supportive in how to have difficult conversations with people. And one of the things he says, if you're having a hard conversation with an employee, a hard conversation during a coaching meeting, bring that point up right away. Say, I'm going to talk to you about something that you may not like. I'm going to talk to you about something that may be difficult for you to hear. So let's jump into it. So you don't say, gee, how was your weekend? And, did you watch the game last night? No, that kind of stuff just makes employees uncomfortable. If it's difficult, if you've got to get to it, get to it. And that's what he talks about. So I'll fold in some of those kind of things as well. We'll talk about some coaching tools. Two of them I like a lot. One is keep, stop, start. Keep, stop, start is what are we going to keep doing because it's working? What are we going to stop doing because it's a waste of time? What do we need to start doing? And we'll look at some other coaching tools that could be equally as effective. But I like that one because it's a good overall intervention tool. Keep, stop, start is a good way to have a two-way conversation with employees. Keep doing, stop doing, start doing. You can agree to those things as you go forward, and you can also hold them to that. Last thing we'll talk about is 4 what I would call archetypes of employees. That's the smart slacker, the problem child, the rising star, and the plow horse. And they have really 2 different modalities that make up each of these 4. One is the employee's willingness and enthusiasm, and the other is their ability. And so we can see 4 types based on that. So we'll talk about those as well. So I gave you this kind of foreshadowing discussion. Coaching is a pre-discipline or a post-discipline conversation about performance or behavior. What it's not is you're not a life coach and you're not helping people with their personal issues. Thank God we have employee assistance program. Most people do EAP provider. If you don't know a lot about EAP, I've been myself very useful for some of my PTSD issues from the old days. EAP is a very valuable resource for us as supervisors and managers to refer employees to, usually 3 to 5 free confidential therapy sessions for the employee. It's part of our benefits package for them. If you don't know a lot about it, you can get some insight and information, typically from your HR managers, your HR director, and they can get you some information, 800 numbers, contacts, things like that, so that the employee can reach out himself or herself confidentially, so you don't have to know that it's taking place. So I'm a big fan of EAP, but what coaching is it has boundaries, and the boundaries are we stick to the impact on the business. We don't talk about people's personal issues, even though there's stressors and things that come from home that affect their performance. Let's keep it focused on the business part. So I like talking about books in my webinars. I talked to you about The Next Conversation, Jefferson Fisher. I like this book a lot. I mention a lot of this book in the work that I've done over the years, Crucial Conversations. Carrie Patterson, Joe Grenny, Ron McMillan, Al Switzler. I think there is the 3rd or 4th generation of this book is out. It has the same bright red cover. It was a huge bestseller. I think it sold 2 million copies, which those cats get $1 a book, so that ain't bad. Crucial Conversations, what they said was 80 to 90% of our conversations with people, personally and professionally, are routine, normal, and casual. And guess what? We do fine. We paraphrase, we listen, maybe we take notes, we nod, we good body language, good eye contact. 80 to 90%, no problem. 10% to 20% of our conversations, personally and professionally, turn crucial, and sometimes without our knowledge, because of these 3 elements that they have defined. One is strong emotions. If the other person is angry or upset and you don't know it, and you step into a crucial conversation. If the stakes are high for one or both parties, and for employees, a coaching conversation could be high stakes. Am I going to get fired? Am I going to get disciplined? Am I going to get transferred? What's going to happen to me? And the last one, which is even more complex, is opinions vary as to what to do. Different opinions, high stakes, strong emotions. Those 3 things on one or both parties, by their definition, is a crucial conversation. Lots of really good YouTube videos that are on the crucial conversations subject. You may have been through some training programs in your own organization. Lots of consultants teach this approach. I do it as well, just as part of my general discussion about how to have difficult conversations with employees. So what they're saying is, if you recognize high stakes, if you recognize strong emotions, if you realize that different opinions as to what to do for the presenting problem, it is by definition a crucial conversation. Stop, put on the brakes, pull out the tools in your toolkit, be better at how you operate these conversations, how you work through these conversations, because they're not routine and casual, they're crucial. So I look at the couple of things we already talked about, the behavior improvement, that's sarcasm and aggressiveness and rudeness and not good service skills and creating conflict and gossiping and things like that. And then I look at performance improvement, which is, are they working to their job description and job duties? Is the quality of their work to the level we wanted at? The third one we talked about briefly, how do we get a negotiated behavioral agreement between two employees that are at war? And you may have seen this in your career, it may have happened to you, which is you're in a silent treatment battle with somebody that goes on a couple of years over something's goofy. Usually, you parked in my parking space 2 years ago and I never forgave you for it. That's typically stuff when I see when I come into those. So how do we get ground rules so that these people can coexist and get along? Team success and team conflict resolution, where groups are not working to full capacity, either in battle with other team members in other departments. And that's something we want to address through coaching as well. It's easy sometimes in boss world to use labels instead of behaviors. You're always late, you've got a lousy attitude, the quality of work stinks, you need to be better at your job. Those are all labels. My preference is, especially not only in the conversation, but in the coaching notes, is to use behaviors. I need you at work by 8:30, ready to go, hands on keyboard, ready to answer the phone, whatever it happens to be. Your interaction with our customers, taxpayers, visitors, vendors, co-workers needs to change when it comes to these specific issues here, instead of saying you have a lousy attitude. So it is a shorthand, I get it, and it is easier sometimes to make a sweeping generalization, but the problem is the employee does not believe you. They don't say, when you say you're always late, they go, no, I'm not. I was here on time 3 weeks ago, right? When you say Monday you're late 15 minutes, Tuesday you're late 20 minutes, and Wednesday you didn't call in at all, those are specific behaviors. Think about how you shift your language, especially in the performance improvement and behavior improvement conversations, around behaviors instead of labels. The other thing that comes up all the time, and if you have kids, you went through this. My daughter's 33, thank God. I mean, I went through this when she was, a toddler all the way up to teenage years, where they make excuses and they rationalize things and they blame other people or they don't take ownership. And what I think happens is you can get stuck in the coaching ping pong match, which is, yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. You do that for 20 minutes. And what I say is, I hear you. The dog ate your homework. There was traffic. The baby's sick. I get it. Let's focus on some solutions to get you to work on time, right? So what I think is, and I've used this phrase in writing and talking about it, is to put a fence around the excuses. Go, I hear you. Yeah, there is traffic. Yeah, you're in the car. It's Los Angeles or wherever you are. I get it. Let's talk about some ways to get you to work on time, and let's start to focus on some solutions, because you can debate, rationalize, discuss excuses forever, and the employee may not ever take ownership of them. Just say, I hear you. And let's talk about some solutions. The other part about coaching is people may say some stuff about other employees or even other bosses, which they're worried is going to get back to them. And what I say to people is, look, I'm not a lawyer or a psychologist. I have a degree in psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. So what we talk about here is confidential, except if you're stealing from the organization or there's some other ethical violation like sexual or racial harassment, I'm gonna report that or address it. But when you talk about people that you're upset with, I'm not going to run to them and say, hey, so-and-so says he doesn't like you or she doesn't like you. So I think those confidentiality concerns are important. Otherwise, employees say, well, everything's fine, there's no problems, and then that's not what it's true. We talked about the value of coaching files. A coaching file is where you put notes about the discussion you just had with the employee. Here's the 4 things we talked about. Here's what he or she agreed to do. Here's some deadlines. Here's some tools that we're going to apply to help this person with whatever training gap they may have or performance gap. And those things serve as a historical cumulative calendar, so to speak, of what you worked on, so that you can look back and say, over the span of the year, or whatever the rating period was, maybe you're 6 months or 3 months or a year, in terms of writing and crafting an accurate performance evaluation, that I can look at my notes and say, this is what we talked about. And more specifically, am I seeing progress? Am I seeing that this employee is getting better at what we were talking about or not? Is the employee taking ownership? Are we seeing improvement, even gradual improvement? And the employee could look at the coaching file. Don't write anything like, stupid jerk on a Post-it note and put it in there. They could look at your coaching file. It's specific to them. It's not all the employees mixed into one file. Each one has their own. But you use it and you explain to them, this is what I'm going to use to keep track of what we talk about. I have to have a memory like an elephant. If I had 15 people working for me, as I did when I worked for the city of San Diego as a supervisor, I had a lot of things to keep track of. And so the coaching file is not NOT, not a secondary personnel file. It doesn't have confidential things in it or medical issues or workers' comp or anything like that. It's about just performance or behavior. And the reason the employee can look at it is they say, look, I'm not making this stuff up. We did talk about this in February. We did talk about this in July. Now here it is in October, getting ready to write your eval. This is what I'm going to use as my reminder of the conversation and progress that we have hopefully met. So last one, I'm a big believer in praise. I think I've done some consulting for a large retail organization out here in Missouri, and I just didn't see it in the people that I was working with. I didn't see praise given to especially the frontline employees. And there's still a small cadre of supervisors that believe that the reason people come to work is to get paid. And that's the praise enough for them. And I completely disagree. People work for free in charities and churches and groups and their kids' sports team all the time because it feels good. So praise, in my perspective, and especially in the coaching conversation, is a volume knob. Turn it up, give them more praise, catch them doing good things. Even your employees that are challenging and difficult and hard to work with, everybody wants praise. And sometimes that is the key to sometimes the leverage we need to get the changes, because they actually feel better about doing the things that we praise them for. So we talked about this a little bit, catching people walking down the hallway, corridor coaching, face-to-face. Maybe the best environment is neutral. It's in the conference room. It's in a training room. It's in the break room. It's with the door closed. It's not you sitting at your big desk and they're sitting in the little chair in front of your big desk. Maybe you do it by phone, by email, by text, by Zoom. If you have remote folks, all possible. Again, keep good coaching notes. But this is my perspective. Choose the delivery model that works best for the employee. And for, if you have older employees like me, maybe face-to-face is their preferred approach because it feels natural to have a conversation with their boss, as opposed to employees are maybe more introverted, more recalcitrant, more fearful of a conversation with their boss that has some sort of an official feel to it, that you can do it by Zoom or over the telephone and get the same results. So I look at the two sort of dividers for coaching as behavior or improvement, performance improvement or behavior improvement. And then I look at how those fit into what I would call the big seven. So the big seven is what we coach for, right? Work performance, the quality of their work, errors, deadlines, that kind of stuff. Second, violation of policy and procedure. You cannot smoke in the dynamite factory, right? That should be carved in stone. There's just certain things that you can't do. Third one's attendance, attitude, conflict, teamwork, and service. Well, guess what? The first three are pretty easy to observe and document in terms of either violations or success, either errors or things need to be corrected or success. The last four are abstract. The last four are not as concrete, are they? Attendance is very concrete, here or not, left early, mismanaged breaks, lunches, vacations, sick time, whatever. But the last four demand on your part some examples and some proof of what we're talking about, instead of just saying you have a lousy attitude or you cause conflict or things like that. So it is easy to look at the first three and measure them. It's harder to look at the last four and look at them sort of in more concrete ways because they're abstract. How do you make these four, the last ones, more concrete? And then the last one I get, especially from supervisors, especially from executives, especially from HR, is how do we prove that the coaching discussion you had with that employee worked? We see compliance and policy. We see improvement in their work. We see improvement in their attitude, interactions with people, customers, taxpayers, visitors, vendors, coworkers, bosses. We see them taking more responsibility and keeping their promises, being accountable for their work. So when they say, I'll have it for you on Friday at 2, it's on your desk for Friday at 2. And so we use these measurements down at the bottom, compliance improvement, et cetera, to see whether coaching has worked for us at the face-to-face level, but also to explain it to coworker or to HR or to other colleagues or to other bosses about what we're trying to do to get improvement. And so coaching for me is not a 52-week discussion. How soon can I get this employee to where we want them to be? In 3 meetings, in 4 meetings, in 2 meetings, in 1? I mean, my challenge as an outside guy is not to be there forever, but to say, how quickly can I come in and make some impact with this person's performance or behavior? And I think that's what you need to think about as well, which is we want these things to happen fairly quickly. So coaching events, pre or post discipline, intervention for the big 7, performance improvement, behavior improvement, violation of policy and procedure, et cetera. What the management guru Tom Peters, he wrote a book with Bob Waterman called In Search of Excellence back in the day, called MBWA, or Management by Wandering Around. Management by walking around, meaning what do you see? What do you catch in terms of on-the-spot conversations with employees about interactions and performance and safety hazards and the things that may come up that you see and you observe yourself, that you talk to them, again, court or coaching in the hallway. Document the conversation. I spoke to employee X about issue Y, and it goes into my coaching file. One of the things I see in the coaching conversations is sometimes we identify accidentally that the employee has a training gap that we didn't know about. They're supposed to know how to work some piece of software and they don't. They ask other employees to do it. And you go, wait, you've been here 2 years. You don't know how to use our main software? No, I have somebody else do it for me. I mean, I've seen people in factory jobs can't drive the forklift and yet they're a forklift operator. I'm like, how did that happen? So sometimes coaching will identify carefully and strategically and sometimes urgently the need for skill gap training for that employee to fill in that gap. Career planning and advice, mentoring, again, moving the employee if they want to. Not every employee wants to promote, but if they want to move to the next level, how do we help them do that? And then the mentoring part for me, besides career advancement and career support, would be how do we get them to a leadership level? How do we get them to maybe a succession planning level? We talked about the EAP for off-the-job issues. We talked about the value of coaching for especially two employees that aren't getting along, conflict resolution. And again, we talked about the value of praise, the last one there. So let's talk about this issue of the generations. I do a lot of work around conflict resolution. I do a lot of work in my old days around workplace violence prevention. And conflict resolution, to me, sometimes the root cause was not sexual harassment, racial harassment, transgender issues, politics. The issue at hand was this person did not recognize, respect, or value the other generations that they were dealing with. And so I'm the baby boom generation. I sort of understand Gen X. I mostly understand Gen Y. I'm struggling to understand Gen Z as much, right? Because I'm an older guy. And so sometimes you look at this and you say, let's make some generalizations about age diversity as a reason for conflict between employees. Let's use age diversity as a reason as a coach, you may struggle with talking to another employee. And so you say birds of a feather flock together, and you say, as a person, as a human being, I tend to gravitate towards people of my own age, plus or minus 5 years. This is true, right? You could have older friends and you have younger friends, but everybody I hang out with, whether my wife or my best friends or people that I'm close to my whole life, are typically plus or minus my own age by 5 years. The music you liked in high school, you probably still like today. You may not admit it. I went through the disco generation, which is sort of rough. If you ever watch CBS News, my best friend is Major Garrett. He's the chief Washington correspondent for CBS News. He's my best friend since we were 6 years old, and I'm 62. So, I mean, that's a long time. When you think about the people that you hang out with, they have the same pop culture references and historical references. I mean, my daughter was, I think, I don't know, 8 years old during 9/11. I mean, it doesn't register to her. And so sometimes when you look at why doesn't this person understand me? And the answer is I'm looking at a different generation than them completely. So I think a couple of things happen for this realization. One is patience, and the other is empathy. And both people have to have it, where you say, I'm patient with older supervisors. I'm patient with older employees if I'm a younger supervisor. If I'm a younger employee, my boss doesn't value technology the way that I do, looking for the next killer app, right? Then I'm sensitive to that. I'm patient more with that person. I'm more empathic. And that's how we keep these conversations going, even across these generations, because these can really stratify people. They can really solidify bad feelings between people because they just don't understand me. These people just don't get me. They don't get us. And what I look at here is, how about a little patience, a little bit of empathy? How about a little bit of sort of understanding and observation that there's lots of ways to see the ocean through different drinking straws. But sometimes these collisions here, they really harden people in terms of understanding and or getting along or complying. So be aware of that. When I started in coaching discussions, a lot of times I will speak to newer supervisors or even veteran supervisors, especially in training classes, and say, what's the problem? Why don't we do it? And the answer is, we don't like conflict. We don't like confronting employees about their performance. We really don't like them confronting about their behavior. It's hard to tell an employee, stop gossiping. I've done it, right? It's hard. It's hard to talk to an employee about, stop being a jerk at work in terms of these specific things that drive people away from you and hurt the business. Stop doing these things that impact the business in a negative way, whether it's performance or behavior. Do your job to the level we want you to do. How about we aren't trained to do it? Thanks to coming to webinars like this and whatever you pick up along the way, oftentimes it's either informal coaching experiences that you have as a brand new supervisor coming up through the ranks. You've been through some college programs, grad school, training programs, workshops, things like that that your employer has sent you to, or you've gone on your own. So great for that. But really, it's school of hard knocks. You pick up a lot of these things along the way in life. I didn't start off wanting to be a coach. I started off in workplace violence, and I evolved to conflict resolution, and from that to how about some positive stuff in coaching? How about helping people advance in their careers? How about helping people get ahead based on their successes rather than just all this negative stuff? And then how about knowledge or access to resources? Maybe your HR function is small. Maybe you don't have the greatest relationship with your HR department. Maybe you use an outside HR vendor. I mean, it's sometimes difficult to get support from human resources function if it's not like a larger organization tend to be with an HR director, HR manager, stuff like that. And then the last two really kind of break my heart. The last two are when you go to your boss for help and he or she blows you off. And so you hear something like, why can't you manage the other 6 people that you have? You do fine with them. Why are you bringing this problem person to me? I'm busy. Why can't you do as good a job with this person as you do with the other people, which is that top management apathy until when something happens, and then you get blamed for it. And then the last one is kind of related as well, which is the inverse reward system, which is we will not bring up your successes. We will only punish you for your failures. This means that you will not get praise and support for the good work that you do. You'll get singled out for the ones that you could not fix or correct in terms of their performance or behavior. So the inverse reward system says, your boss says, don't bring me your problems, just bring me solutions. What your boss should say, in my perfect world, is, hey, you got some struggles with this employee, let's talk about it. Let's come up with a coaching plan. Let's come up with a performance improvement plan, a behavior improvement plan, even an informal one, that we can get this person back on the right track. Thanks for coming in. Let's get a plan set together for this person and start working on it, instead of saying, why don't you do a good job with this person and what's wrong with you? That's the inverse reward system. So I talked about this a little bit, and I just think it's just so accurate. And human nature being what it is, we move away from difficult conversations. We move away from people that are not our favorites. We move away from people that we have a hard time talking with about stuff, especially change. They argue with us. They make excuses. They rationalize stuff. They're just not pleasant about it. They don't take ownership. And I mean, you could catch them on video doing the problem, and they would still not admit that they ever did it, right? And so as a result, we tend to move collectively towards people we like and people that we think are going to be successful. And so look at that second piece. You say, this woman I'm working with, she's really skilled. There's a lot of good things for our organization. She's going to make a great leader one day. Well, we manage to that expectation, don't we? This guy over here is kind of a goof. I'm just not getting anything out of him. Maybe he'll win the lottery and I don't have to have him anymore. He'll stop coming in every day. I just can't get anywhere with the guy. Then we manage that expectation as well. So what I'm telling you, as hard as it is for me to sit here and lecture you about your belief system, you got to spend more time with those employees that need your help. You have to say to yourself, the one that challenges me is put in front of me for a reason, which is I have to use my best skills, tools, and approaches, plans, and conversations to get this person to where I want them to be. Now, I will give you an escape hatch called the PAM. The PAM is the personal accountability meeting, which is despite your best efforts, despite your best work, despite many months or weeks of conversation, you're not getting the change that you want. Let's flip it around to say the last coaching conversation you have with an employee is going to be called the PAM, the personal accountability meeting. What's the key word in personal accountability meeting? Accountability. They are not taking ownership, and we switch. The very next conversation is discipline. How this helps is, for those of you that have union environment, is you say the next conversation is going to be discipline. So if you need a rep, that's going to be the time to have it. We have the PAM, personal accountability conversation, as a last ditch effort to say, I have tried and tried, And we have talked about this until I'm blue in the face, and I'm going to tell you now that we're not going to have any more coaching conversations. We're going to move to discipline. And that is the last step before you get there. And it gives the employee notice that, we're going to stop chatting about this stuff and we're going to move to more consequences. One of the issues I see in organizations is you may, and this could surprise you, I suppose, is have to be asked by your HR or your boss to meet and coach other employees who are not in your chain of command. And you say, why would you do that? Well, you have technical expertise, you have experience. Maybe, and this is the one I see most often, you have rapport with this person, which is more, there's a better connection between you and their direct boss. Maybe there's conflict between that employee and their direct boss. And so sometimes you may be asked to step in and coach people that are not in your chain of command. If you look at the people that work for you, one approach is to look at your past evals and say, what am I seeing in compared to the evaluation that I wrote or somebody else did with what I'm seeing in my direct observation now? What am I hearing from my peer bosses, peer supervisors and managers? What am I hearing from my boss? What am I hearing, if anything, from HR? I think what you want to address with your employees is literally, I will be talking to you about stuff around performance or behavior. It's not punishment, it's not discipline, it's coaching, and that's what I'm going to be doing. And if that's not something that's in your toolkit now, that's something that you want to introduce starting right away. Second to the last one there, you wait for employees to hang themselves, to screw up, to put themselves at risk for discipline. It's too late. It reflects poorly on them and certainly on you that you let them drive the Ferrari off the cliff, so to speak. So you meet proactively with at-risk employees, typically by looking at things and saying, if I was to write this performance evaluation for this employee today, would it be below standard or above standard or at standard? And if it's below standard, that's who you need to start talking to. And then the last one, look around your environment and say, who are my employees that want to promote? Not all of them do. But if my employees want to promote, can I get them to the next level? Maybe that's moving from staff member to frontline supervisor. Or, if you're in a union environment, it's, they're moving from a staff position to a lead position, something like that. But also, in terms of the highest levels of coaching, how do I use mentorship with the rest of my supervisors and the rest of the department heads of my organization to get this person to a higher level, to get them to a strategic level, to get them to a management level? And maybe we do that over a 2-year span of time. Someone's going to leave, and one of the department heads is going to leave. And you say this person is well qualified for this job, but we have to get them there. We have to help them. And so the last 2 books I've written, one on human resources and one on coaching. The coaching book will be out next year. I wrote these for library folks, library leaders. And I spent a lot of time talking about how you use mentorship to prepare people to get ready to take more responsibility in their positions as you look at them taking over departments, teams, that type of thing. So I talked about this a little bit. Just want to go back over some of the rules. A goal for each session, 1 idea per meeting, 45 minutes to an hour seems sufficient. Make sure you start on time and finish on time. We talked about confidentiality. If you tell me you buried your parents in the basement, I'm telling the cops. But if you tell me that you don't get along with Sally and Dave is not your favorite guy, I'm not going to run to them and say that. I'm just going to factor that into our confidentiality. No physical or electronic interruptions. What it says to the employee, if we do that, allow that, phone calls, people popping in, is this is not a serious conversation. And you don't have to say this is a serious coaching conversation, but you want to demonstrate that this is important because it's not just a chat. And I think sometimes employees think, well, my boss didn't really mean that when he or she said those things, right? And the answer is yes, I did. And so it's not just a chat, it's a directed conversation about performance or behavior. It may be a fine tuning, or it may be an actual, bigger intervention, but it is not just a chat. Look at the homework piece. I put it in quotes because they do it at work. We don't say, read this management book and write me a book report. At home, we don't do that. Their work is done their homework is done at work. But what we give them perhaps is, here's an article I want you to consider. Here's a copy of our attendance policy. Here's a copy of our safety policy. Here is a template cheat sheet, guidebook, booklet, manual. Here's a specific policies that I'm concerned that you're not following. I want you to read. Come back to me with those things read and understood, right? So we give people homework. Go to a website, take the self-assessment instrument. Go to the website, watch this video. Go to YouTube and watch this business-specific video on this particular topic I want you to see. And so we give people homework for 2 reasons. One, it reinforces the conversation that we've just had, and also it says this is important. Know this stuff, our next conversation. So the phrase I use a lot called demonstrated use of the tools. I like it because it says, let's talk about what you just did last week that we were hoping that you use the tools we talked about. Let's say, this employee is nervous about giving a presentation to a staff. Say, let's do a couple, practice PowerPoint presentations. How did it go, right? Employee comes to you and says, I'm having problems with this coworker. You say, well, how did it go? So coming back to the second coaching meeting, the next coaching meeting is, did we see from the employee a demonstrated use of the tools? I think that's a powerful phrase. Did they use the tools we have been discussing? Again, it's not just a chat, it has directions. And then the last part is, how do we prepare for the next coaching meeting? Make sure you read this, make sure you've studied this, do your homework, whatever, if it's necessary. Now, some things you may do in one meeting and that's it. Others, it's going to take weeks to get the changes we're looking for. So kind of talked about this. There's strategic direction coaching, that's senior leadership. Sometimes they use outside consultants for that. I've done a lot of that stuff, focus groups and executive strategy retreats at a hotel, stuff like that. Career development is really about not only the promotional possibilities, but the mentorship. Performance improvement is where we look at filling in some of those training gaps, maybe helping the person to get to the next level in terms of promotion. So you can see the goal for each is direction for the strategic, personal skills for the career development, job skills for the performance improvement. Then the corrective stuff is stop doing certain things. This could be pretty serious stuff, harassment, bullying, taking credit for other people's work, not showing up for stuff, attendance, things like that. There's a skills deficit or there's a compliance deficit. So the goal there is compliance. And then the last one, special problems. Sometimes people have off-the-job issues, which we make referrals to employee assistance program. That's when we get talking about leave of absence and all kinds of stuff that may be related to stressors that they're facing off the job. So the most of the stuff I do is career development, performance improvement, and corrective coaching. I would say if you're working with frontline employees, it's probably corrective coaching, performance improvement, and then career development is 1, 2, 3 for you as well. Let's talk about the PAM as we get close to the end here. The PAM is the personal accountability meeting, the speak to Jesus, cards on the table. This is the last coaching conversation we will have before we switch to discipline. So this will become, the next meeting will become what's called a wine garden meeting for those of you that are in a union environment. And what the PAM is I'm frustrated. We've been talking about this stuff. I'm not seeing changes. Either the changes you have initiated don't stick, in which case we keep talking about them again, or you refuse to do it. And so sometimes I talk with employees about being a legacy employee. You've been here a long time. We have an expectation, you know how to do this stuff, but you don't want to, which is kind of interesting to me and frustrating. But I'm going to tell you that I've run out of options. I've run out of ideas. We're not going to talk anymore about performance improvement or behavior improvement. The next meeting is going to be, if I don't see the change that I'm looking for, next meeting is going to be discipline. Note this personal accountability meeting. Note why you have it. Note when you have it. Note what is said so that the employee can't say, I didn't realize that the next step was going to be discipline. This is the last opportunity for them to correct performance or behavior. Next step, discipline. Personal accountability meeting. And it's not your accountability, it's theirs. Okay, last couple things. Look at this process here. It doesn't always go smoothly, but plan for the meeting, right? Handouts, things you want to give this person to read beforehand. Open the meeting, right? Describe problem areas, right? Again, behaviors, not labels. Help the employee generate solutions. And there's a part in the coaching discussion I call setting the hook. The minute the employee starts to say stuff like, well, I suppose I could, or I guess I could, yank on the hook, right? Set the hook. If you fished at all, that means yank on the pole and set the hook, which means now I'm getting them towards ownership. Okay, that's great. Let's talk about how you're going to do that. You're going to get an alarm clock. You're going to get a rooster. You're going to hire a wake up service. Okay, let's figure out how to get you to work here on time. Set the hook. If they can't do that, then we have a struggle sometimes because they go, I don't know what the solution is, boss. You figure it out. And then you say, okay, I'm going to tell you. And we're going to fine tune the choices and selections I make, or we're going to do it with yours. Preferably, you have come up with some solutions, employee. But if not, I'm going to tell you what we need to do. And sometimes you're going to have to be more directive. I think 6 and 7 is really about kind of praise and being positive and optimistic, even in challenging discussions, and then wrapping up the meeting and say, I'm going to send you a recap of what we talked about, just an email of a couple paragraphs. I'm going to note in my files what we discussed. See you next time, and let me know if we need to fine tune anything. But let's talk about this next week or in 2 weeks. And the other part about coaching meetings for me is that I typically will want a week in between each one. Sometimes with my clients, they're like, how soon can you get here? And I'm like, why? All right, we need you to talk to this guy, 6 times a day. And I'm like, that doesn't work that way. People need time to reflect. People need time to let stuff percolate. You talk to them about some issue and they go, I got to think about this. How am I going to do it? Or if I'm going to do it. So for me, a week, even unless it's super serious, in which case we would move to perhaps, suspension or something like that. For me, I would say I need a week in between each one. More of me is not better. More of you in the coaching discussion is not better because it can be overwhelming. You can be in kind of a fire hose, dousing situation where you just give them too many tools, too much information, too much to do. So I say, let's focus on just this and I'll see you next week. Let's focus on this improvement and I'll see you next week. One meeting at a time, one issue at a time. Prioritize the one that gives you the biggest concern about the impact on the business. Talked about this, keep, stop, start. What do we need to keep doing collectively, you and I, because it's working? What should we stop doing because it's not a good idea? It's waste time and money. What should you start doing? You can do this as a personal inventory for yourself. I usually sit down around December 30th and 31st with an adult beverage and have this conversation about my career. I've been doing it since '87, so hopefully I'm coming up with progress. But this is a structured way to use kind of an organizational development tool to say to the employee, well, here's the stuff I want you to keep doing, and maybe you have to be directive about it. Here's the stuff I want you to stop doing because it's a waste of time and effort. And here's the stuff I'd like you to start doing. And maybe you get some buy-in, maybe you get agreement on this, or maybe they come up with their own ideas. You can also, parenthetically, do this as a group discussion, and it works really well. I do this with staff meetings all the time. We may take 2-3 hours, half a day, to bang out some of the most critically important keep, stops, and starts. We come back as managers, supervisory team, prioritize these things and say, okay, which ones can we make happen? Which ones do we need permission from our bosses or HR? Which ones are probably not going to work, like, scotch in the break room. But when we look at keep, stop, start, and the employees see us activating the things that we talked about or they discussed or they brought up, it's very powerful in terms of the change in the organization. Let me skip this one. Okay, last one here. I talked about these 4 possibilities here. Low actual contribution, low potential contribution is the problem child. Okay, that's the person that may not survive the probationary experience. They need a lot of coaching and support and probably discipline. The plow horse, high real contribution, but the potential is low, means that they only do what we ask them to do. They have a lot of half-done projects because they're not very creative thinkers. They've not been told to think outside the box, and so they don't. The most challenging up there, as you can probably guess, high potential contribution, could be doing the work but doesn't want to, is the smart slacker. And that's a person that's retired on duty. They don't want to be there. They're too young to retire. They're topped out. They can't promote, so they just give up. They're sarcastic. They're difficult sometimes. Their body language in meetings is roll their eyes and put their pen down on the pad and just look away. And that is really a tough coaching conversation, but it has to happen because this person can create other smart slackers. We have structure and discipline and coaching for the problem child, but the smart slacker is probably the biggest impact there of everybody. Plow horse just needs praise and support. And the rising star we talked about, make sure it's not burnout path or teacher's pet. So really, really challenging, okay? Last thing to focus on here. Again, behaviors, not labels. SMART goals, you know this acronym, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, trackable. Deadline-driven coaching meetings, right? They don't go on forever. Results-oriented, we're looking at change, and reward-focused, we give people praise. The employee, not you begging them or threatening them or pleading with them or asking them 25 times, the employee owns the solutions. They will come up with their own, which we support or give praise to, or we will help them come up with their own if they cannot. And the last one is recognizing shared fates and shared responsibilities. So this is a dynamic here that was created by my dad. My dad's name is Carl Albrecht with a K. You can find him at carlalbrecht.com. A lot of cool stuff at his website, instruments and videos and all kinds of cool stuff. What he talked about was coaching from the way he defines things in terms of a model is we start off with a tutorial role and we're teaching, right? Then we move to an advisory role where we're giving advice and we're helping the employee, but they're doing a lot of it themselves. And on the last stage, they're doing it themselves. Now, this could happen in one coaching meeting. You go from tutorial to advisory to assisted discovery, or this could take 6 months to a year. But in the end, the assisted discovery is the employee says, I've got it, and maybe even they feel like they've done it themselves. So a couple things to think about. Don't forget the value of the PAM. Don't forget how you look at the intervention for coaching is either performance improvement or behavior improvement, or in a tough situation, both. And the last one is, don't forget, the impact on the business is what gives us reason to coach, and crucial conversations, high stakes, strong emotions, different opinions as to what to do. Deb, back over to you, and happy to have any discussion or questions. And also, if anybody wants to send me an email, they can do that as well.
Thank you, Steve. Great presentation. I learned quite a few things about myself as well as ways I can improve. We do have a question from the audience for the keep, stop, start tool. Should it be more of a statement such as X is working because of Y, or A is not working because of B? Start doing E for the purpose of F. So is there any advice you could give us on the format of that?
Yeah, I think you have some flexibility there. You can make it much more one way and directive, which is, I'd like you to stop doing this because it's not working for us. Or let's talk about how you might want to start doing this. And it's more collaborative and more of a two-way dialogue. So I think you have lots of choices there. And I think you go back to the impact on the business. The reason we want you to stop doing this, or the reason we want you to start doing this, is because of this. So you can give examples or support, but it can be a highly directive. You know, you must start wearing your safety equipment, right? You must stop smoking in the dynamite factory, whatever it happens to be, or it can be more of a two-way dialogue.
Okay. Well, that was the only question from the audience. So I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. Oh, wait, we have one more question that just came in. Can you give an example of how to address the hygiene issue? Oh, introduce that, but specific advice you can give?
Yeah, you broke up, Deb. Can you give me that one more time?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Can you address how to address the hygiene issue?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a business impact issue, and that's what I would say to people. And if you go back to Jefferson Fisher's book, The Next Conversation, which I highly recommend, he says, say that up front. I have to have a hard conversation with you about a tough subject, but I'm going to talk about something that's impacting the business. It impacts the business in a negative way, and it's your personal hygiene. We have an expectation you come to work clean, with clean clothes and no body odor. And you know, I can give you policies and things like that, but I can also ask you, you know, is there any accommodation we need to make about, you know, medications or ADA or anything like that? You know, it's more of an HR discussion, but I use it as the, you know, let's address the dead elephant in the room right away, not sugarcoat it, and also just connect it back to, it's not you personally, it's the impact on the business. I don't want, you know, you say we've had some complaints from coworkers or customers. I can't have that. This is why we're talking about it.
Great. And do you recommend having a bilingual person or bilingual materials present during a coaching session?
Yeah, I addressed that in a book I wrote. It's a great question, because sometimes we will use some you know, Western English or American acronym, like, you know, you need to get on the ball, or, you know, you need to get with the program. They don't know what that means. So if you have non-native speakers, it's really useful to have either a peer supervisor that speaks their language, which can translate, could be very useful, and then also providing any materials, especially copies of policy, that could be very useful. Otherwise, they just sit there and they nod, and you're like, am I getting through to this person? The answer is probably not, because they're not hearing it in their own language.
Okay, great. So that was one of the last questions. A lot of people are asking, will the materials be available after the session today? Yes, we will be sending out an email later on, probably tomorrow. And it still sounds like I'm echoing.
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Hold on.
It's a little,
okay.
It's a little choppy, but no big deal.
Okay. One more question just came in, and since we have a minute left, do you have any advice for a newly promoted supervisor supervising in a new team dynamic and feeling awkward about it?
Yeah, I would say look at the past evaluations, performance evaluations, as kind of a guide. Talk to your boss or peer supervisors and say, you know, give me a sense of this person or my team. What concerns might you have, positive and negative, that I may need to look at, and then pick stuff that you feel comfortable talking with them about, and don't, launch into a heavy duty coaching intervention, just say, let's start having one-on-ones with people at least once a week so that they get used to talking with you. And then you can start to fine tune what you think is the highest priority for you.
Okay, well, I changed microphones, so hopefully this will be okay for everybody. If we did not get to your question, we'll follow up with an email. Thank you, Dr. Albrecht, for your time and expertise today. We will be sending information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. And we hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of time. Be sure to join us on October 28th for our Cal OSHA update on workplace violence prevention for general industry in a non-healthcare setting. Thank you, everyone, and have a very safe day.
Thanks, Deb. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.